I'm Maria Thea Harris, or Velo Sews on social media. Welcome back to Sober 50s podcast on So Organised Style. It's great that we have, more representation of people who are happy to share their sewing and their style on Sober 50, so it's great.
Yeah, it's the first place I go, Instagram in particular, if I want to make a pattern I haven't made before.
Okay.
That's the first place I go to look up the hashtag.
That's Leanne of Kilts and Quilts. She's an accomplished kilt maker and lives in New Plymouth, New Zealand. Leanne is today's Sober 50 podcast guest. Grab a cuppa and watch or listen to Leanne now. Leanne, thank you for coming on to So Organised Style podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just quickly let our listeners and viewers know how we met.
So I came across your podcast. I'm pretty sure it was a post on Instagram, the So Over 50 connection.
Yep.
I went back to the beginning to listen to your very first episode on Spotify, and just found the issues with the audio. And so I really wanted to carry on listening.
Yeah.
And I thought I would let you know in case you weren't aware that episode had some issues that might put people off. Because if it was me, I would have wanted to know. So, and then, that's how we kind of made contact.
I like the fact that you told me, and I went back to those first episodes. And yes, the audio can very much be improved. And on the day that you contacted me, I went online straight away and found out how to clean up really, really quickly existing published podcast episodes. And that's my goal now between now and March, is to clean up, because there are 503 episodes now.
Wow.
So I'm going to focus on the first 50 because they were in the early days.
Yeah.
So they need to be cleaned up. Sorry, I laugh about it, but
that must have been a while ago.
2019, August 2019,
okay.
I started. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've retired some episodes, but other episodes, like the very early ones, what I'll do in that cleanup is I'll let those people know that this is what I'm doing, so that they know. And sometimes most of the time they're really happy, and then they are happy to let their followers know that, oh, Maria's cleaned up the podcast, go and listen. And sometimes they might say, can we do a new one? I'm like, yeah, sure, no worries. Yeah.
Hey, that's great. Yeah, that's good.
So again, thank you for contacting me about the listening experience of the early podcasts.
It's kind of hard sometimes because you don't want to just be completely critical, but I really want, the content was really interesting and I really wanted to listen. And I think I did go on to listen to some more, and very quickly it changed. So you figured it out very quick.
Let's focus on you, Leanne. What's your Instagram name?
So my Instagram name is Kilts and Quilts. So quilts with an N in the middle, Kilts and Quilts.
Yep.
I chose that along with my email address a long, long time ago. At the time, I was co-owner of a quilt shop and a trained kilt maker too. So it kind of seemed appropriate.
Okay. And how long did you have the shop?
I was there for about 7 years.
So do people in the New Plymouth community still remember the shop that you had when they bump into you on the street?
It's still open, still going.
Oh, okay.
My business partner that I owned the shop with, she's still there. I've worked in retail a few times, a few different places around New Plymouth, and met a lot of people that know me from somewhere. And can't always figure it out. And I'm the same. I know they're familiar. Sometimes I remember their name. I don't even know where I know them from. But because like sewing, it's a great community, just like the sewing community. And
look, speaking of the sewing community, and you mentioned Sober 50, do you follow them on Instagram?
Yeah, I do.
Is there anything about that community that keeps you going back to them?
The fact that it is such a great community, the sharing, the work that must go into, the upkeep of the Instagram account, and I know that it must be a lot of work, and particularly because I'm over 50, so it's really nice to just see other women in my age group kind of represented on social media.
It's great that we have more representation of people who are happy to share their sewing and their style on
Yeah.
Sober 50. So it's great.
Yeah. It's the first place I go, Instagram in particular, if I want to make a pattern I haven't made before.
Okay.
That's the first place I go to look up the hashtag.
Sewing and kilt making, what came first for you?
Sewing, definitely sewing from probably from about 13, 14.
Yeah.
I can remember, and my mum and I have chatted about this fairly recently when they were over for a holiday. That at the age of about 13, I had a really old sewing machine. I don't know where it came from, but it had decorative pattern cams, like plastic cams that used to go in the top to create patterns. But I know I used to make makeup bags. So I'd make like a small makeup bag and a larger one, just a really basic rectangle with a zip. And my mum used to sell them to her workmates. She met up with one of her workmates about 20 odd years later, and this lady was still using one of these sets that I'd made all those years ago. So that was kind of how I started with just crafts in general.
At that very young age, you were able to make the makeup bags in various sizes. And
Mm.
did they all have zippers?
Yeah, they did.
See, now that's a skill
Yeah,
that a lot of new people struggle with, and
yeah.
existing people like me still struggle with.
It's funny because my mum doesn't sew. She can knit a bit, but she wouldn't mind me saying she can just about sew a button on. She has, other talents, but she can't really sew. Her mum, my nan, she was an artist. She painted and she sewed as well in a creative way, not in a very strict follow a pattern kind of way.
Yep.
She would lay a pinafore down on the top of the fabric on the carpet, cut round it, and sew a dress.
Mm.
And then my dad's mum was a tailor. We didn't live close enough to them for me to ask them officially for help because my dad was in the Air Force.
Oh,
So
okay.
we travelled around all my childhood. I don't know. I must have picked something up. I guess maybe, yeah, in the genes. I'm not sure.
Could be.
Yeah.
And the kilt making, when did that start? So if the sewing started at a very young age,
Mm.
what drew you to kilt making?
So the kilt making came a long time later.
Okay.
The kilt making came in 2000. And so by this time, I was married, two children. I've got two sons. My husband is Scottish and was in the Air Force too. So we were living in Scotland. And my eldest son really wanted a kilt. He desperately wanted a kilt and he wanted to wear his kilt with his skate shoes while he was skateboarding. That was just his vision.
Okay.
And at the time, I was working in a fabric shop
Yeah.
in a local town in Forres. That's probably about 30 odd miles from Inverness, to east of Inverness. I happened to know one of the customers was a kilt maker. So I would chat to her whenever she came in
Mm-hmm.
and I would ask her lots of questions. And I am a question asker. I want to know
Yeah.
all the details, even if it's way above my head. I want to know how it works, why it works. So I would ask her all these questions, and she used to come in quite regularly. And probably on about fourth or fifth time of her coming in and me questioning her, she was obviously a bit fed up with it. She was actually really kind. She said if I wanted to learn, if I bought the tartan, she would kind of talk me through it step by step, gradually, and I would make Liam a kilt. But then she came in and she said, but if you're really interested and you really want to learn, why don't you go to kilt school? I didn't know there was one. So luckily for me, there was a kilt school in Keith in Aberdeenshire. At the time, the only kilt school of its kind in the world. The guy that had set it up, he had been a tailor in the Scots Guards
Yeah.
and he had left the army and set up the qualification with the assistance of the Moray Council and written a qualification for the Scottish Qualifications Authority.
Okay.
So you went for a year to kilt school. In that year, you had to make 15 kilts and they all had to be self-funded. So lots of our friends got kilts for half price because we just charged them the price of the tartan and I did the rest as part of my training. Because of the postcode area that we lived in at the time,
Yeah.
the course was free for me. So there were people that came from outside of Morayshire that had to pay. And actually, even sometimes people came from overseas. And I think there was even one lady who is from Dunedin in the South Island. She had inherited a kilt making business, and she had gone over there just to do like a really intense 3 week course. It was a great course. It was really intense, 4 full days a week. Yeah, 15 kilts in that first year.
15 kilts in
Yeah,
less than 12 months.
yeah, from scratch.
It was really fortunate that you were living in the right place. You had access to the fabrics as well.
Probably wouldn't have, wouldn't have been able to afford to pay for it, possibly. I don't know how much
Yeah.
the course would have cost if I hadn't lived in that area. And it was about a 40-minute drive away from where I lived. So,
Yep.
but luckily there was another lady on the course who had only been on it for a little bit longer than me. We car shared. So that was great. And then we became great friends.
I think when we were emailing each other, you also make sure that now that you live in New Zealand, that you talk to people about kilt making who are interested.
Yeah, I have had people ask me about teaching it, but I don't know that I know enough, even after 25 years. Like I teach dressmaking,
Mm-hmm.
I teach sewing. I don't have a problem with that. But the kilts, I don't know, there's just something I don't know. I've never taught anybody to make a kilt yet.
Okay. On the podcast, we've had Dwayne McLeod, who is mainly menswear, and he came on, and most people know of him because he made kilt for himself and his son when I think his son was getting married. He sewed the jackets as well to go with them. And he also talked about a resource online called X Marks the Scot.
Yeah, I've joined that. Yeah, I had joined
Ah,
that a long time ago, actually.
yeah,
I think I was doing some research into a tartan and I wanted to find out if it was available. And that it just popped up online
yeah.
on a Google search. So, yeah, I have been helped by members when you go in there and ask a question. It's a bit like Reddit for kilts. Recently, I was asked about making a utility kilt, and that wasn't something I've made. They're a completely different genre in the way that they're put together anyway. A utility kilt is just made with cotton canvas or a denim or
Yeah.
and they're machine stitched because they're supposed to be really practical. And all of the kilts that I make that I was taught how to make are all done by hand. So there's the only machine stitching involved is you stitch the waistband on
Yep.
across the top. The rest of it's all hand sewn.
Each of the pleats is hand sewn.
Every plate, all of the canvas is pad stitched into place.
Yeah.
Everything's hand sewn. The straps are hand sewn on. An 8 meter hem if somebody needs it hemmed. 8 meters of herringbone stitch along the hemline if they want a hem on it.
So you must have a large amount of sewing needles at your disposal.
Yeah, I do. I tend to use the same ones over and over. And my
Okay.
favorites, I have different size needles for different parts of the kilt kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So for the pleats, because the idea is to get as many small stitches in each pleat as possible for strength. And I think when I was training, I think we were supposed to be aiming for 11 stitches to the inch or something like that.
11.
11 stitches to the inch. They were tiny. And sometimes our tutor would come along and count them.
Okay.
I
That's
don't think
serious.
it is a lot. It is a lot. I'm not sure that you need that many, but that was how we were taught. So
Mm.
I don't think I do 11 now. I mean, I do plenty. They don't come apart, but but yeah, for that I actually use little hand quilting needles for the pleats because the smaller the needle, the easier it is to get a lot of stitches in. So but yeah, I do have my pin cushion with all my favorite needles in,
Wow.
and that just sits there with my thimble.
That's dedication.
And you actually need very little in the way of equipment. A good tape measure
Yep.
and needles, a basting thread, and thread to sew it all together. I only use 3 types of thread in total: a basting thread, just a white basting thread,
Yep.
a cotton one. The thread that you use to sew the kilt together with for the majority of it is it's like a core spun, so it's a cotton and polyester. So as it's strong, it's cotton on like a waxed cotton on the outside and a polyester core.
Right.
And then I use a linen thread for putting the straps on, a Gutermann linen thread for that.
And is that easy to find, the linen thread?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It is.
Most Gutermann stands will have it on their stand.
It's really good information for people
Yeah.
who are looking to make their own.
And so then apart from canvas
Yeah.
that you put in along the pleated area at the back where you
Mm-hmm.
cut. So between the waist and the hips, you cut the pleats away once you've stitched them, folded them, and then you stitch a piece of canvas about 10 centimeters deep,
Mm.
and it just gets stitched across the back of the pleats and pad stitched in. So
Mm.
rows and rows of pad stitch that will overlap each other like a kind of a herringbone. And then another two pieces along the apron fronts, just for stability. There's not a lot of stitching on those. You don't want that to show through to the right side. And then cotton fabric for lining. And again, you just line the pleated area and the top of the aprons as they fold over, just to hide the canvas, really.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and that's it. Straps and buckles, and that's all you need. And your tartan, of course.
Of course, yeah. So when you made all of those, sorry to keep going back to the
That's all right.
15 that you made
Yeah.
and, making sure that you had people who wanted them, did you also ask them what tartan they would like it to be made in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my first kilt was my son's,
Yep.
and we're Munro is our surname. So he had a Munro tartan kilt. When you buy tartan, particularly clan tartans that are
Yep.
connected to a clan, they usually come as a modern version, which is usually quite bright. So our Munro tartan is a red tartan. And then they often have an ancient or a weathered version,
Yep.
which is just kind of much more muted colors. So the Munro modern is bright red, and then the muted or the ancient Munro is kind of an orangey color, and that's just supposed to represent a tartan that has aged, weathered, or is older, as the dyes naturally kind of have faded. But that's recreated with modern dyes. So Liam had one, Joe had one, Joe had a third one later on. So all of the kilts to start with were all knife pleated. So just the pleats all go the same way. We
Yep.
had to make one box pleated kilt. They often say that men that own box pleated kilts often are the husbands of kilt makers because they take a bit more maintenance. They need to be pressed more regularly just because there's much more fabric behind the pleat when it's
Mm.
box pleated. So it doesn't hold the creases as well as the knife pleats. Luckily, because we were living in Scotland and my husband was in the Air Force, and a lot of his friends and our friends and his acquaintances were Scottish. So we just asked, who wants a kilt? Joe would ask, I would ask.
Mhm.
And because, I can't remember how much a new kilt would have been at the time, but they're not cheap.
No, they're not.
And so they were getting it literally just for the price of the tartan because I needed the kilts for training, and funding them all ourselves would have been not possible. They chose a guy traditionally can wear his own tartan
Yep.
and his mother's maiden name, tartan. So Joe has a Ferguson kilt as well as a Munro kilt, because his mum was a Ferguson. I mean, that's tradition. In reality, anybody can wear anything, and nobody's going to come up to you and say, I know that that's a such and such tartan and you shouldn't be wearing it, because it
Mhm.
doesn't really work like that. It's important to some people that they are only wearing the tartan that they are entitled to wear. So I've made my brother one, but he, because we're English,
Yep.
he didn't feel comfortable wearing a tartan. And so he chose I think it's called dark isle, and it's black. It's completely black fabric, and the tartan is woven in. So with the different direction of the weave is when you hold it up to the light, you can see what looks like a tartan pattern. It's all done in one color. I don't know how they do it. It's amazing. I mean, I know it's woven, but very, very cool. And that comes in different plain colors. He chose black, which was the hardest, the hardest one to sew because you probably know what it's like even sewing black on a sewing machine, but hand sewing it is just a nightmare.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't sew black on black at night in the winter. It
No,
just, not if you don't have to.
no, definitely not. No.
No.
So yeah, I had to have a good light.
When you were making all of the kilts, not quilts, kilts, did you find it easy to work on tartan that was made of wool or not made of wool?
I only ever make a kilt in wool.
Okay.
I've never made a kilt in a tartan that's not wool. Like, I love the tradition of that.
Mm.
I like the fact that it's very traditional to make a tartan in wool, and I've never made one in any other fabric. I quite like the unconventionality of making one in denim, or I know there's been leather kilts made, but I've just never done it myself. But I do know that there are people, and there were people that I trained with that were really particular, and certainly our tutor at the time, he wouldn't have appreciated anybody trying to make something in a non-traditional fabric.
Mm. And I
So
suppose from his perspective, he'd set it up so that he could pass on the tradition,
yeah,
not to break tradition.
yeah, and also because I know one of the reasons he set it up, because for the most part, kilt making is a tradition that is handed down generation to generation, and a bit like knitting, I suppose, and it's a bit like feral knitting on feral
Mm.
Shetland knitting, and all of that. So it's usually handed down generation to generation, and he saw kilt making had kind of stalled a little bit, and there weren't as many people that were doing that were handing the tradition down to younger generations, and he was concerned about that because he loved the art of kilt making and the craft. So that was one of his reasons for setting up the school and writing the qualification.
I'm
Yeah,
so glad you did the course.
yeah, me too. Me
Yeah.
too. I loved it. Like I certainly don't know it all, and I mean, there are thousands and thousands of tartans out there, and people will say to me, "Oh, do you know what that tartan is?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. I don't have a clue. I'd have to look it up
Mm.
because there's so many. A lot of them are often similar colors, could just be a slightly different set size, slightly different colors. There could be 4 strands in the warp in the stripe,
Yep.
or there could be 8 strands in a stripe, and that could make it a completely different tartan. So
And I think you can also design your own as well now.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can, and
And
there are
register it. Yeah.
yeah, and there are. I mean, lots and lots of organisations now have their own tartans as well,
Mm.
which I think is great.
Yeah.
No, and there's also district tartans. So when my youngest son got married about 7 or 8 years ago, I made him a kilt. He wanted the Munro Ancient, but my eldest son, it was a colour thing for him, and so he chose the Holyrood tartan.
Okay.
They both our sons were born in Edinburgh, so that was what he chose, was the Holyrood tartan, which is like a navy blue based tartan. So almost every district in Scotland has its own tartan, sometimes multiple ones.
Mm. Oh, okay.
So
It's really interesting.
it
Yeah.
is really interesting. A lot to it, and a lot that I don't know, but I'm still learning.
It's really great that you're sharing your knowledge with us today on the podcast. What do you normally sew when you've got time?
So I make nearly all of my own clothes,
Yep.
the majority of them. I sew for my grandchildren. I've got 5 grandchildren, and I love to sew for them. I love to sew for my mum. I mean, very biased, but she loves everything I make. It doesn't matter,
Good honor.
yeah, she's, my parents have always been such great cheerleaders for
Mm.
me, no matter what I do. Always cheerleading for me, and just my mum's happy with anything.
Well, it's made by you. You put
Yeah.
the care and the love into it. You know, she's not biased. She's being,
Yeah,
real.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, if you
Yeah.
make clothes for other people, there are people that are make worthy. It's family,
Yeah.
sometimes friends, but mostly family that I know will appreciate and understand what's gone into it.
Mm. So with all of those people that you sew for, as
Yeah.
well as yourself, what state is your sewing room in?
My sewing room is really small. We moved to this house about 4.5 years ago, and I had a really big sewing room. I had a sewing room that was big enough I could have my sewing table set up in the middle, and it's one of the cutting tables with the sides lift up.
Yep.
And I could walk all the way around it and have a table for my sewing machine, a table for my overlocker, and bookcases along one wall. It's actually one of the things that I miss the most about our old house. So and now I have a sewing room that's probably about a third of the size of that, maybe less. I've got one table for my machines, and then my cutting table is set up, just one leaf is up and against the wall. So I keep it really tidy, but I'm a fairly tidy person. In the middle of a project, I might have a few things laying around, but after I've finished, I like to tidy it up and clear the space for the next one.
Okay.
And I love nothing more than actually coming into my sewing room and having a good old tidy. like if I haven't got any inspiration and I don't know what to make, coming in here and looking through I mean, I'm lucky to have a whole room. I know a lot of people don't. And
Mm.
I've got a small cupboard and a lot of my fabrics are hanging in there. So I've just got them on coat hangers and just opening the cupboard door and having a rifle through there is usually gives me some kind of inspiration as to what to make.
That's good. It's
Yeah,
good
it's
that
cool.
you've got the room the way you want it. I know
Yeah,
it's not the right room that you want, but you've got it the way you want it.
that's cool. It's small but mighty.
Yes. Where can we find you online?
Instagram, really, Facebook as well. So it's Kilts and Quilts, and my business name is Kilt and Cloth. I do have an Instagram account for that, but I am a bit bad about updating it. I must admit, I just forget. It's really, and recently I've come back to my kilt making as a job. I've also incorporated some sewing classes, just doing a bit of everything. I'm doing a few alterations, I'm doing some commissions and doing a bit of teaching. And I really like the mix. So I'm kind of growing that just slowly, but it is growing. So more people are coming to me and yeah, that's great.
We should follow both of your accounts then.
Yeah, Kilts and Quilts is probably my busiest, but I try and update kilt and cloth as well. It's kind of hard sometimes to keep them separate
Yeah.
because I could be doing a bit of everything, mostly on Instagram.
Okay. What advice would you give people who would like to start making a quilt? Sorry, I'll say it again.
A kilt.
A kilt. What advice would you give people who would like to start
Um,
making their own kilt?
I've thought about that, but the answer is I don't really know. I'm not sure I could have taught myself to make one without having done the course that I did.
Yeah.
So this book here,
It's
so
called.
it's called The Art of Kilt Making. Barbara Tewksbury and Elsie Stumeyer, I think her name is. I think they're American.
Yep.
There's a few things in here that I wasn't taught because I've done quite a lot of kilts for Highland dancers. Making a kilt for most men is fairly straightforward because the majority of them, if they're going to carry extra weight or if they're going to have shape, it tends to be a bit of a belly, often quite flat at the back, but a bit of a belly. So we kind of learned how to fix that when we were measuring and making.
Mm.
But making for women, girls, is completely different. And a lot of dancers have often got shape because of their dancing. They've often got shapely hips and small waists.
Yep.
So I got this book on the advice of another kilt maker because it goes into a lot more detail about shaping the pleats. So traditionally a kilt would be worn right up just below the rib cage, so way past their waist. But when you stitch the pleats in, you stitch them in on a very slight curve. So coming over the from kind of from the widest part of their bottom and their hips, and you come in and then kind of flare out very slightly at the top to allow for the rib cage
Yep.
opening out. That shaping is a lot more involved when it comes to making for a dancer. There's a few bits of information in this kilt making book that really helped with that. The method of kilt making is really different to how I was taught. But I think if anybody was really, really keen to have a go,
Mm.
then this would be a really good start. There's a lot of information in there, a lot of information about how to measure, about how to work out how many pleats you need and the size of the pleats, which changes with every single kilt you make, because it all depends on the tartan and the size of what they call the set. So the size of the repeat basically on
Yep.
the tartan itself. And so I've replaced most of the kilts for the Stratford pipe band in Taranaki, and my husband plays the bagpipes with them. That's been an ongoing project over quite a few years because they wear their kilts kind of in the military way. Every pleat has a stripe, the same stripe going up the center of the pleat. So there's no pattern repeat to follow. But because the stripes are quite close together, most of those kilts end up with about 30 pleats across the back. The more pleats, sometimes the better if you've got a lot of shaping, but
Yep.
also then that does mean that you could have literally a difference between the hip and the waist of 2 or 3 millimeters to angle that line of stitching in.
Yep.
So from the widest at the hip to the
Yep.
narrowest at the waist. So it could be 5 mil. And then you have to come out just maybe 1 mil each side. And by the time you repeat that 30 times, it makes a massive difference. There's a lot of maths. I was terrible at maths at school. I moved around a lot as a kid. My dad was in the Air Force, and when you were in the Air Force, it wasn't. I went to one school for 6 weeks and another one for 3 months. So I went to about 15 different schools, and maths was what suffered for me
Mm.
academically. But it's really interesting because when it comes to making kilts and sewing, and even making quilts, I find it all really easy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I still scratch my head, but I don't have a problem with knowing how to work out what I need to work out mathematically with a calculator, of course. But yeah, so there is a lot of maths involved as well as the sewing. It's
Yeah.
mostly maths.
I'll put a link on the show notes and on the blog post for that book.
If somebody has questions, I mean, I probably couldn't talk them through a kilt from start to finish, just, you know, in messages. But I'm certainly happy if people want to know something, or they want to start. Tartan wise, I know there are lots of tartan weavers in America and Canada. I order all of mine from Scotland. I have accounts with like the two or three main Scottish weavers, and I order my tartans from Scotland. But there are weavers in Canada and America that weave, wool tartan, so it's available kind of everywhere. One of my customers he plays the drums with the Army Pipe Band in New Zealand. That they wear, like, we call them Hairy Marys, the really old, heavy wool kilt. Tartan's very different now to what it was kind of 40, 50 years ago. So this stuff that I've got to work with is quite rough. It's almost verging on a blanket. It's really rough. His kilt that he wears to play in the band with doesn't fit him very well. And so he's come back with two old kilts that he found in their kit room. And he's asked me to put them together and make one to fit him because neither of these fit. So I've had to unpick and rip
Oh,
apart. But you can remake a kilt from
yeah.
scratch. You can just undo it. And usually when you put it back together, when the pleats are cut apart, you end up, when you open it up, you end up just with like a U shape in between
Yeah.
each strip.
Yep.
And you just need to make the pleat wider than it was when it was sewn together. And you can usually just remake it. Use the same tartan. You can also turn them inside out. You've got a tartan or a kilt that's been worn, maybe has faded
Yep.
on the outside. It could have been really well worn. It could have hatches or holes, and you can then turn them inside out, and then you end up using what was the under apron as the top apron. So I'll probably have to join these two together. So I'll cut them both to the same length. There's often a join in a tartan. It depends on how the tartan is woven. Some tartans are woven as a narrow weave, and so then you buy 7.5 meters and it's all in one piece.
Yep.
And some tartans are woven what we call double width. So then you cut that in half from the selvage into the center on
Yep.
both sides. And then the center piece that you cut out is what you use for your waistband and your other bits and pieces, just your buckles and things. And then the selvage traditionally is used as the hem. You don't traditionally hem a kilt unless it's for a child, a dancer, somebody who's gonna potentially grow.
Mm.
So the selvage edge is what's the hem of the kilt itself. There's often a join. It's not unusual to have a join or two in a kilt.
That's a lot to know. And you know all of that. And I know that there are going to be people who are really keen to find out more. So, I encourage people to DM you, but also do
Yeah,
some research too.
yeah. And if they DM me, I'm happy to, give them my email address and
Yeah.
chat to them by email if I can help.
Leanne, thank you for being so helpful to me personally and to
That's
everyone
kind.
who has been listening to you and is interested in kilt making.
Thank you. I was kind of a bit blown away when you asked me if I'd be interested to be on the podcast, because I'm like, well,
The kilt making is something that you've been doing for a very, very long time.
it
You
is.
invested a lot of time at the start to get that skill level.
Yeah.
And I mean, you live with it day in, day out. But for someone who has got no understanding and is keen to find out, what you've already discussed with us today on the podcast is invaluable. So thank you.
Yeah, when I really think about it, that it's not a common
No.
thing to do. And it's certainly not common for an English woman living in New Zealand to be making kilts. So I am aware of that.
People in New Zealand who need their kilts made and also mended
Yeah.
must value the work that you do.
Well, I think it's I'm not very good at getting my name out there, so a lot of it is word of mouth.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, it is good. It is good, and I've had quite a bit of work. Like I said, I've done a lot for the Stratford Pipe Band, and sometimes just randomly people will find me and ask me to make a kilt for their son's wedding or something like that. I had one lady, she had woven tartan and wanted me to make a kilt for her husband with the tartan that she had woven.
Wow.
For her son's wedding. That was amazing.
And that's a true heirloom, an heirloom piece for that family. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool. I mean, yeah, how she could weave 7.5, 8 meters of tartan, I don't know, but she did.
She did.
Yeah, she did. She did a great job.
Leanne, thank you for being on Organised Style podcast.
So cool. Thank you. It's great to talk to you.
Same here. Lovely to meet you.
You too.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. This episode of Sober 50 podcast on Organised Style was both audio and video produced by me, Maria Thea Harris, in my sewing room, with permission of Leanne, sound by Kanife on YouTube. Many thanks for the ongoing monthly support of the podcast Patreon contributors. Their membership enables me to produce these podcasts for you for free. You can subscribe to Soul Organised Style podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps and on YouTube. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sober 50 podcast archive on Soul Organised Style. Direct message Sandy and the editors at Sober 50 on Instagram to contribute to the ongoing posts and challenges the team promotes to the community. I look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.